This is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. We must increase vaccinations among the unvaccinated with new vaccination requirements.
It's not going to work. We have other countries with much higher rates of vaccination, and they're seeing record surges of COVID because that's what viruses do.
Many of us are frustrated with the nearly 80 million Americans who are still not vaccinated.
Their freedom. I want my freedom to live.
Rest in peace, Wheezy.
We are going to need the people to engage in age-old American tradition of simply saying, no, I'm not going to comply. Now, what are you going to do about it?
It never stops. They want things to get worse because they want you to suffer so that they can grandstand on your suffering and push for even more control.
They have criminalized freedom. They've made getting sick illegal.
This isn't about COVID any more than the Patriot Act was about Al-Qaeda. It's about government asserting more control over your lives, your rights, your properties, and in this case, your bodily autonomy.
It has a lot of vaccinated people alarmed because of the power grab that's involved.
Enough is enough. We better change our tune and start resisting.
Government makes up less than 1% of the population. If even 5 or 10% of Americans simply refuse to comply, all of this goes away.
Absolutely, this is the hill worth dying on.
We haven't given the statutory authority to any agency to do this kind of thing.
There is no such thing as government power. There's only what we are willing to comply to.
We're in the tough stretch, and it could last for a while.
That's what this has always been about. It's never about what they say it is. It's about controlling you. And it ends when we decide to end it.
This BS is going to stop.
It's time for us to
There's
wake
only
up.
one way to fight back against this, and it's mass non-compliance.
This is the most important thing to fight against.
You can help stop this. You are the power.
There's nothing, not a single thing we're unable to do if we do it together.
And I'm fucking livid that we are stuck in the timeline where Alex Jones is right. Kind of worse.
Oh no! Oh, okay, no.
Why aren't the Amish afraid of COVID? Because they don't have TVs.
As I said, democracy is a system that reinforces authoritarian ideals.
I hope I don't get canceled. Talk to Steve.
Being a victim of a tragedy doesn't make you an expert in public policy.
Well, I mean, AOC is a drama queen and she's full of shit.
Remember, they lost the Afghan war 10 years ago.
You brought a free.
They said you don't get to tell us no. Say health department. I said hell no.
It wasn't any better. It was better. Rock work.
What the fuck do you have on your face?
You want me to live in a better place? Have some babies and raise them not be stupid.
Remember thinking, man, government's not going to like this shit.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, thanks for tuning in to another surprisingly off-schedule afternoon special. This is Review and React. We're going to cover some interesting news from the week and get our perspectives and opinions on it. But thanks for tuning in. First and foremost, make sure you hit that like button, leave some comments, join in the chat, say hi, ask your questions as we go, and as always, remember to subscribe. If you want to join the production team and help us keep this show going, keep the show on the road, you can go on over to patreon.com/O'Donnell for Liberty. Again, that's patreon.com/O'Donnell, the number 4, Liberty. And that helps support the show and keep the show going for the price of less than one super chat a month. You can join the production team, get access to the private Discord, as well as the general Discord channel for the community, and behind the scenes access to helping put the show together. But what we're here to talk about today is the CATO Institute. For those of you who've been following libertarian drama on Twitter in the past couple months, the CATO Institute's been seen better days. That's one way to put it. We'll say the CATO Institute has been seeing better days as a libertarian institution and a beacon of libertarian policy. In fact, there is a Soho forum tonight between Ilya Soman of the CATO Institute and Angela McArdle of the Libertarian Party, where the CATO Institute representative is taking the position of mandatory masks and vaccines and saying that it's a libertarian solution to require mandatory vaccinations. It's asinine. But one thing the CATO Institute is great about every year is putting together their Freedom in the 50 States rankings, where they break down all the categories of freedom that they want to talk about and they want to discuss and rank states by, and they rank each state in each category and then give an overall ranking. And they came out this week, and to no surprise, New Hampshire was number one. I mean, nobody's surprised at New Hampshire being number one overall. That's just what we would expect. You know, liberty lives in the free state of New Hampshire. Live free or die, the state motto. The Free State Project having resounding success in keeping New Hampshire free, but it did slip away for a bit. For a little bit there, Florida was the number one state, but New Hampshire is back and has reclaimed its position as the number one freest overall state in the union. But they do rank this on a bunch of different categories. So before we do get into the analysis and the conclusion about how CATO Institute decided that New Hampshire was the freest state in the country, I want to go down the categories that they do rank on. And the first category, we'll just go in the order that they list them, is going to be fiscal freedom and fiscal policy. And fiscal policy consists of categories for taxes, government, employment, spending, debt, and fiscal decentralization. Selfish me wants to check number one. Where does New Hampshire land? New Hampshire is number 3 in the fiscal category. Okay, that's not bad. Out of 50 states, being number 3 is the most fiscally responsible state. Not a bad way to start things off. But where's the freest state in the country with regards to fiscal policy? So they do have this great little chart where they put the top 5 states in gold so we can see them. South Dakota, number 4. Tennessee, number 2. Pennsylvania, number 5. New Hampshire, number 3. Florida does take the cake here. Florida, the freest state in the union on fiscal policy. And lacking an individual income tax and featuring a hot climate, Florida has long enjoyed substantial in-migration of well-off retirees. But as we've noted in the past, the state attracts more than seniors, as others vote with their feet, and good weather and the increased opportunity afforded by Florida's freer society. Florida does especially well on economic freedom. Fair. Looks like CATO is also afraid to wear a coat to stave off the state. But retirees are a huge part of any economy. People, pensioners, well-off people, the rich who just spend for the rest of their life. So Florida has an edge up there. But it's also God's waiting room, where people go to die or wait to die. But that ends up being a financial benefit for the state of Florida. In my opinion, they're discounting the source of a lot of that money. Florida, a lot of the money coming into Florida being spent by these retirees is Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security money that's propping up Florida's economic standing and propping up Florida's ability to keep their taxes low and provide economic freedom for their people. And so that is being heavily subsidized by other states that do pay more into those Social Security programs. The next category, regulatory freedom. Regulatory policy includes the liability system, property rights, health insurance, and the labor market. Now, New Hampshire does end up being 24th in this category. Still in the top half, but not a good look for New Hampshire. Not a good look for Florida, which is 21st, not far off. Turns out the freest states in the regulatory environment, the freest states in the employment and regulatory environment are going to be Idaho at number 4, Wyoming at number 5, Nebraska at number 2, Iowa at number 3, and the freest state for regulatory reasons is Kansas. So let's check out why Kansas is the freest state. Kansas has had a turbulent freedom record of late, bouncing around quite a bit year to year, although the state tumbled 16 places on the overall freedom ranking between 2014 and 2019. The actual absolute loss in overall freedom was quite small. However, most other states gained significantly in freedom during this period, whereas personal freedom and regulatory policy have been buoyant, fiscal policy has deteriorated since 2015. Kansas made national news with its fiscal policy in 2013 and 2014. The state's tax cuts were large and reduced the state tax burden from 5.5% of income to 5.1% of income. But the next year's tax hikes bumped that figure back up to 5.4%, just under the national average. And then further tax increases in fiscal year 2019 and 2020 boosted the tax burden to 6.2% of income, higher than the national average. Kansas's local tax burden, 40% of income is right at the national average, and thus Kansas today, a high tax rate. So it looks like the reason Kansas does drop a hot minute, and let's check their overall ranking. They're only 27th overall in the bottom half of freedom per CATO's rankings in the country, even though they are number one on regulatory freedom. So just because you're number one in a category doesn't mean you're number one overall, and that is what we're seeing with Kansas here. While they do have a lot of deregulated markets and things that we can take hints from and how we want to make our states more free when we're working as libertarians in legislative lobbying and things like that, you do need to look at the whole picture, not just an individual subject matter. Next category, personal freedom. Personal freedom includes a variety of categories, including victimless crimes, guns, tobacco, and education. No surprise to anybody who's ever visited the Northeast or New England that 3 of these top 5 states do include Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont, as Vermont number 4, Maine 3, New Hampshire 2, right out the bat. The culture of Northern New England is one of personal freedom. The culture of Northern New England is one that wants the government out of their way. New Hampshire's motto, live free or die, is shared as a sentiment across those borders. New Mexico at number 5 and Nevada at number 1. So we're going to check in with Nevada and see what makes them the most personally free state in the country. Unsurprisingly, Nevada is consistently one of the top states for personal freedom, but it is a top 5 freest state overall as well, coming in 3rd. It does so through a top 10 score on overall economic freedom to go along with its number 1 ranking on personal freedom. The Great Recession greatly damaged Nevada's fiscal position, so we should expect the COVID-19 pandemic to cause some dip for the 2020-2021, despite a recent upswing in the state as the gambling sector rebounded. Nevada is number 1 for gambling freedom, no surprise, and it's the only state with legal prostitution, local option. However, on a criminal justice policy, Nevada is more of a mixed bag. Non-drug victimless crime arrests were high, but have fallen over time, and it is possible that they overstated because of Nevada's high tourist population. The incarceration rate is about average for its crime prevalence and has been trending in the right direction. Drug arrests are low. The civil asset forfeiture regime is mediocre following a small reform in 2015. Marijuana was legalized in 2016 by initiative and is now a top state for marijuana freedom. Gun rights are middling relative to other states. Extensive background checks were enacted in 2019. Open carry is extensive, but there is no permitless concealed carry. Nevada is one of the top states for alcohol freedom, with fully private wholesaling and retailing, low taxes, no blue laws, legal direct wine shipping, and wine and spirits in grocery stores. In 2013, the state enacted a law giving illegal immigrants access to driver's licenses, which outweighs its 2011 move to ban handheld cell phones use and increasing overall travel freedom. So, Nevada, number 1 in personal freedom. Next category, economic freedom. You got Idaho coming in at number 5. South Dakota coming in at number 4. New Hampshire coming in at number 3. Florida, Tennessee at number 2, and Florida at number 1. We did cover this in fiscal. I think economic and fiscal being separate categories is kind of giving yourself more reasons to throw grades. But we already looked at Florida's reason, and the reason their economic freedom is so high is because of the mass immigration they're seeing of retired individuals and wealthy individuals and people who suckle on the teat of the state for their Social Security. Lawsuit and litigation freedom, how plaintiff-friendly each state's civil liability system is. Alaska comes in at number 4, Nebraska at number 2, South Dakota at number 5, North Dakota at number 3, New Hampshire number 1. So let's check out New Hampshire on their lawsuit-friendly state. And it's kind of weird to think about a lawsuit-friendly state being an indication of freedom, but I think one of the reasons that lawsuit-friendly state can be pro-freedom is a couple of years ago, New Hampshire passed a constitutional amendment giving every citizen and taxpayer in the state of New Hampshire standing to sue the government over anything. Anything they want, they can sue the government. And it's a very plaintiff-friendly judicial system. So it's very difficult for the government to win those cases. And so it's turned the citizens and the court system into a check on the government because it's so friendly and so easy to sue. Land use freedom. New Hampshire does come in at number 40 there. We'll get into that. Property taxes are very high in New Hampshire as compared to other places, even though we do have the lowest overall tax burden among many states. But land use freedom includes eminent domain reform and land use regulations. The freest states when it does come to land use are going to be Georgia at number 2, Alabama at number 1, Virginia number 4, Arkansas at number 5, and Oklahoma at number 3. So let's check in on Alabama and see what makes Alabama so free. All right. So, as a socially conservative deep south state, it's unsurprising that Alabama does better on economic freedom than personal freedom, but 3 of its 4 neighbors do substantially better on economic freedom: Florida, Georgia, and Tennessee, with only Mississippi doing worse. Alabama's overall freedom level has risen since a trough in 2012, and over that time it has gradually gained to 10 places in the ranks. It's the biggest one-year gains in freedom came in 2015, 2013, and 2019 in that order. But if we ignore federalized policies, the only significant one-year gain came in 2013. Alabama has always been one of the lowest taxed states in the country. Its combined state and local tax collections, excluding motor fuel and severance, were an estimated of 8.2% of adjusted personal income in fiscal year 2020. State level taxes fell quickly in the early stages of the Great Recession and have increased little since then. Alabama's debt burden is fairly low. However, public employment is very high because of publicly owned utilities and hospitals. On regulatory policy, Alabama does especially well on land use and labor policy. However, it does well below average on its tort system and certain cronyist policies. Local zoning has a light touch, allowing the housing supply to rise elastically with the state's growing population. That's the big problem we have in New Hampshire, is our zoning laws are oppressive as hell. And the zoning laws in New Hampshire are managed at the most local level, at the states and towns, but they aren't elastic and they don't allow for growth in housing opportunities with population growth. So that's where Alabama beats us on land use regulations. Marriage freedom includes the ability for couples to enter into private contracts, both civil unions or marriage. So when CATO looks at marriage freedom, they're not just looking at gay marriage or deregulated marriage. They're looking at the ability of individuals to engage in marriage contracts of a varying degree with as little hindrance or pushback from the state as possible. The freest states in this matter are going to be, we got a lot in the top 5. There's more than 5 in the top 5, which means we got some ties. Massachusetts at number 16. Tennessee at number 1. All right, so it looks like we got Vermont, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Virginia, North Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, New Mexico, Colorado, California, and Tennessee, all tied for number 1 freest states in marriage. I'm not going to dive into that one. It seems pretty straightforward. You can do what you want. Your personal relationship is your own. The state's in the way. New Hampshire being 28, I'm less concerned about seeing how everyone's tied for number 1. So New Hampshire's only a few steps back there. Education. The education category takes into account requirements and restrictions for private and home schools. That's your education freedom matrix here. Who has the freest private schools and who has the freest homeschooling opportunities for people to opt out of the state-run education system. Florida's number 2. Georgia's number 4. Illinois is number 7. New Hampshire, number 5, in the top 5 for freedom on education. But Arizona's number 1, so let's check out Arizona on education. Number 1. Arizona has moved up in the overall rankings the past 2 decades, improving considerably on personal freedom while maintaining above-average performance on economic freedom. It's lost ground consistently on regulatory policy, but it's still ranked in the top 20. Fiscal policy types. Let's find education. Arizona's personal freedom improvements are due to growing gun rights. They did pass constitutional carry in 2009 and 10, medical marijuana law, school vouchers passed in 2011 and 12, declining victimless crime arrests, the abolition of its sodomy law because of a Supreme Court decision in Lawrence v. Texas, the judicial legalization of same-sex marriage, liberalization of its wine shipment laws, and a significant asset forfeiture reform in 2017. On the other side of the ledger, what's holding them back? Incarceration rates are still quite high, climbing relatively consistently until reaching their peak in 2014, and then moving down slightly after that. Arizona's cigarette taxes are higher than average, and smoking bans have become comprehensive and airtight. The later, like the state's minimum wage, is explained in a part by a ballot initiative drive, which really does result in some observable tyranny of the majority. There are local vaping bans, and the state banned driving while talking or texting on a handheld cell phone in 2019. Not much change has been observed in alcohol freedom, where the state is better than average, or gambling freedom, where it's worse than average. Number 1 on education, but not number 1 on much else. That's what I'm getting from that. All right. Next category, we have occupational freedom. The occupational freedom category takes into account occupational licensing, education, and experience requirements. How easy is it to work? Or does the state get in the way of you making your own work and being a productive member of society? From east to west, we've got Rhode Island at number 4, Vermont at number 5, Colorado at number 3, Wyoming at number 2, and Idaho at number 1. Is this going to be the only category where Idaho leads in occupational licensing reform? Let's check it out. Idaho is one of the most economically and socially conservative states in the country. As a result, it is perhaps unsurprising that it is a top 10 state for economic freedom and a bottom 10 state for personal freedom. The state continues to enjoy substantial in-migration, primarily from the less free West Coast, even though they're still pretty west. I mean, Idaho's on the border of the West Coast, so I guess relatively Washington and Oregon will always be less free than Idaho, but hey, that's one way to put it. Idaho's fiscal policy has been improving over time, but it remains weak spot in certain aspects. State-level tax collections as a share of income have settled consistently below 6% in the 2010s. All right. Idaho does well on the board, across the board on regulatory policy, earning its second place ranking and one of the best states for occupational freedom. But since 2009, the state has begun to license more occupations, so they're going backwards. Idaho, currently the freest state in the country to work in, the freest state when it comes to occupational licensing and the government staying out of your way and letting you work, is going backwards. So I wonder, they must have had one hell of a lead before, because they're going backwards and still number 1. Whereas you have states like New Hampshire and Nebraska that are going out of their way to reduce occupational licensing. In the category of victimless, the category includes variables that relate to individual actions that harm no one. Think your victimless crimes. What's getting people arrested? What's getting people in trouble? Is the state trying to regulate your behavior even though it harms nobody? Free states. From east to west again, we've got Michigan at number 4. Oklahoma at number 3, Nebraska is at number 1, Arizona at number 2, and California at number 5. California is in the top 5 free for a particular category. But let's check out what makes Nebraska a leader. Nebraska is a state of extremes within our economic freedom dimension, as it's the second best state on regulatory power, but 47th on fiscal policy. Like other Great Plains state, Nebraska has usually had a very good regulatory policy. Kansas is the only state in the country that outranks it on that margin. But Cornhuskers have long suffered from poor fiscal policy, and it's only worsened in the past few years. Fortunately for Nebraskans, the state has gone from 48th on personal freedom in 2000 to 20th today. They're getting better. Still not that great, though. Land use, highly taxed. Nebraska is only middling on criminal justice policy. Incarceration rates have generally been low, but they have increased over time, unlike in some other above-average states. Drug arrests have been very high, but they've come down pretty steadily, with a one-year blip in 2019. Victimless crime arrests have been moving in the right direction for a while and are now near countrywide averages. This is a far cry from the sky-high rates 2 decades ago. The legislature finally enacted comprehensive asset forfeiture reform in 2016, one of the best in the country. Nebraska is 4th worst on educational freedom. Controls are high, including detailed annual reporting requirements and notifications for homeschoolers. Non-sectarian privilege private schools are subject to mandatory approval and teacher licensing. The state has no private school choice programs. Gambling freedom is mediocre, and social gaming isn't allowed. Nebraska's not free, folks. They're number 1 on victimless, even though they're only middling the country, and they're approaching the average on victimless crime arrests. But as things go, they are not free. Turns out the next category they're going to tie. Health insurance freedom, east to west, New Hampshire. That's overall. Health insurance freedom, east to west. We're going to start with Delaware at number 4. Oklahoma, number 10. North Dakota, Idaho, and Nebraska coming in at number 1. We haven't taken a look at North Dakota yet, so let's take a look at North Dakota. After a stretch of years where its relative overall freedom ranking declined from 12th to 25th, North Dakota has seen steady absolute gains during the past 6 years and is now at 15th nationally. There remains the most room for improvement on fiscal policy, where it's a middling 31st. North Dakota's criminal justice policies. Cool. Let's check out the health insurance regulations. All right. North Dakota has a monopoly state fund for workers' compensation insurance and has long had an employment discrimination law. When it comes to health insurance regulations, still under state control, North Dakota is tied with Idaho and Nebraska for number 1 in the nation, with none of the most expensive mandates and with a light touch on managed care plans. Occupational licensing in North Dakota has crept up, but nurses and physicians' assistants enjoy ample freedom of practice. There is no sunset review law. Insurance freedom is low because of prior approval of rates and lack of membership in the Interstate Insurance Product Regulation Compact. There is no certificate of need loss for hospitals, but there is one for moving companies. The state has a General Unfair Sales Act and a minimum markup for gasoline. The civil liability system is 3rd best in the country. So if health insurance is healthcare is where you want your freedom, North Dakota wins on that category. Next category, labor. The labor market includes right to work laws, disability insurance requirements, and workers' compensation. From east to west, freest states, we've got Virginia at number 2, Indiana at number 3, Wisconsin at number 3, Iowa number 3, one hell of a tie there, Kansas at number 3, and Texas at number 1. So Texas buddies, I know you only rank at 21st on the overall freedom list, but you do win in the labor market. So here we go. Texas talks a good game about freedom, but it could stand to deliver a more freedom-oriented policy regime. It comes in at only 21st in this edition, rescued largely by its top 10 economic freedom score, but it has never been higher than 15th overall. The problem is that Texas has always been a less free state for personal freedom, and now is the second worst state on that margin. Despite some absolute improvement over time, its economic freedom is likely one reason it hasn't slipped out of the top half of states, and why it's been such a job-producing and population attracting machine. It does especially well on fiscal policy, where it ranks 12th. It also has a solidly above average state on regulatory policy, but not as good as one might expect at 22nd. I think this one's straightforward. Texas has always been one of the most economically free states in the country, but it's always been in the bottom ranking of personal freedom. Texas likes to claim that they are the home of freedom in this country, and a lot of people are being suckered in by that, going to Texas and searching for freedom because New Hampshire is too cold for them or Florida is too wet for them. Texas is still right there, and Texas looks like a great option on the surface, but Texas is not a great option if you value personal freedom. Texas is a great option if you value labor freedom and economic freedom, but if you value things like personal freedom and anything on the personal freedom scale, Texas is not where you want to be. On the alcohol freedom scale, the alcohol category includes restrictions on distribution, taxes, blue laws, keg registrations, and happy hour bans. From east to west, freest states, we have Indiana at number 5, Wisconsin at number 1, Missouri at number 2, Arizona at number 3, Nevada at number 4. So let's check out Wisconsin. This is the first category they've ranked in the top 5, so let's see how free Wisconsin really is. Wisconsin is one of the most improved states since 2000, and had a great deal of that credit goes towards the rise in personal freedom. Personal freedom matters, folks, to a lot more than you would imagine. Not just economic freedom. The Badger State was 48th in the country in personal freedom as recently as 2010. That spot now belongs to Texas. 49th is Texas. But it's steamed all the way up to 21st since then. In economic freedom, Wisconsin performs better on regulatory policy, where it is a top 10 state than fiscal policy. It still has higher than average taxes, but they have fallen gradually since 2012. Okay. On regulatory policy, we don't see much change in recent years. Regulatory freedom grew in 2015 because of a right to work law, but the policy environment at the state level has been fairly stable since. State ranks right in the middle of the pack on land use freedom. Local zoning has not gotten out of hand. Wisconsin is a below average ranking state on criminal justice. The incarceration rate is right where it was 20 years ago, after getting better about 10 years ago and then worsening. Non-drug victimless crime arrests have dropped, but the state's asset forfeiture regime is among the best in the country. Equitable sharing revenues are significantly lower than average. Tobacco freedom is low because of an airtight smoking ban and high taxes. The state even has local vaping bans. Education freedom grew with the expansion of vouchers. However, private schools are relatively tightly regulated. Wisconsin could improve by reducing the income tax, while continuing to cut spending on employee retirement and government employment, abolish price controls, and reform the state's marijuana laws consistent with reforms carried out across the nation, including decriminalizing possession. So Wisconsin, number 1 in alcohol, not that great overall. Home. They're actually 17 overall, so they're still in the top half. Asset forfeiture. This is a big one for a lot of libertarians. I don't know how this plays into economic versus personal freedom, because it really touches both categories. You should be secure in your possessions. That's your personal freedom, but you should also be secure in your monies, and that's your economic freedom. And the state having the ability to just take shit from people is bad juju, no matter how or where it happens. East to west, top 5 freest states on asset forfeiture. New Hampshire, number 4. Wisconsin, number 3. Nebraska, number 5. South Dakota, number 2. New Mexico, number 1. So this is the first category New Mexico's led on, so let's check out New Mexico. This category reflects the extent to which a state's asset forfeiture rules encourage revenue sharing with the Department of Justice. Nothing good comes from sharing anything with the Department of Justice. New Mexico has long had far more personal freedom than economic freedom, but it has never fully turned around economically, despite some movement in the right direction in absolute terms since 2000 on fiscal policy. Still, it remains mired at 48th place on fiscal policy, with a 35th place ranking on regulatory policy and a 43rd best score on economic freedom. As a whole, its 5th best ranking on personal freedom cannot keep it out of the bottom 10 states in overall freedom. Personal freedom is important. I know I give Texas crap for its personal freedom score being so low, but again, the point here, personal freedom is not the end. You do need to balance your freedom. New Mexico's personal freedom is where it stands out from the pack. It is a solid criminal justice policies, coming in at 13th. Victimless crime rates, drug and non-drug, are low, as are incarceration rates. The state's asset forfeiture law is the best in the country since putting limits on equitable sharing in 2015. Cannabis, alcohol, and travel freedoms are all strong suits for New Mexico, although the state isn't a leader in any of those areas. However, marijuana was legalized in 2021, so that should substantially help its ranking on marijuana policy going forward. Gambling freedom is limited, but it's still a top 20 state. From 2013 to 2017, physician-assisted suicide was legalized, but that's a tiny part of our index. The state is one of just 2 to have both a broad Religious Freedom Restoration Act and a broad Equal Rights Amendment. Connecticut's the other. Tobacco and educational freedoms are weak spots in a top state. Students required to go to school for 13 years, the most in the country, and the state has no choice programs apart from a public school open enrollment. Cigarette taxes are high and smoking bans are extensive. New Mexico has avoided raising the minimum wage. It also performs weakly on gun rights, coming in at 33rd. The state does well on open carry, but still has no permitless concealed carry. Not good. The next section is gambling freedom. Does anybody in chat want to take a guess at what state has the best gambling freedom? Like, pretty sure it's going to be Nevada. I haven't checked yet, but it seems like that one's going to be straightforward. So, the state with from east to west, the states with the best rankings on gambling freedom per CATO. We're going to start with Maryland, number 5, Pennsylvania, number 4, West Virginia, number 3, Louisiana, number 2, and my guess was right, Nevada at number 1. First time we got that in order from east to west, but let's check this out. Nevada's first state to lead in any category is gambling. They are the freest state in the country to gamble in. Let's check out what there is to know about Nevada. Unsurprisingly, Nevada is consistently one of the top states for personal freedom, but it's the top 5 freest state overall as well, coming in 3rd. It does so through a top 10 score on overall economic freedom to go along with its number 1 ranking on personal freedom. The Great Recession greatly damaged Nevada's fiscal position, so we should expect the COVID-19 pandemic to cause some dip for 2020-2021, despite a recent upswing in the state as a gambling sector rebounded. I want to talk about their personal freedom. Okay. Nevada is number 1 for gambling freedom. No surprise. It's the only state with legal prostitution as a local option. It's more of a mixed bag on criminal justice policy, though. So we have gone over this before. Civil asset forfeiture is mediocre. It's a top state for marijuana freedom. Gun rights are middling. Extensive background checks. Gambling is such a small part of personal freedom that even though Nevada has legal gambling, legal prostitution, it doesn't bring them up. Next category is another one. I think it should be a relatively minor category, but they count it as its whole thing. Tobacco freedom. Tobacco category includes taxes on tobacco, smoking bans, internet bans, and vending machine regulations. I've lived in New England a long time. I don't remember the last time I've ever seen a tobacco vending machine, but east to west, top 5 freest states for tobacco freedom. North Carolina, number 5. South Carolina, number 3. Georgia, number 1. Mississippi, number 4. Wyoming, number 2. Let's check out Georgia. This is Georgia's first category being number 1 on something. So let's see what makes Georgia free. Georgia has been one of the fastest growing southern states, likely because of its strong performance on economic freedom. Economic freedom also drove the state's high overall freedom ranking. However, the state performs poorly on personal freedom, despite some consistent absolute improvements since 2006, even without considering post-Obergefell bump because of the federalization of marriage policy. I like that subtle dig there. Georgia was not going to get credit for personal freedom because the Supreme Court and the federal government forced them to be more free on marriage. I'm all for localization. If Georgians don't want to be free on marriage, Georgians shouldn't have to be free on marriage. The federal government probably did overstep there. But interesting way to look at things. Like other conservative southern states, Georgia does well on labor and land use policy. It has a right-to-work law, no minimum wage, relaxed workers' compensation regulations, moderate zoning. It has deregulated telecommunications and enacted statewide video franchising. Unlike some other states in the neighborhood, however, Georgia also enjoys a relatively good civil liability system. The one regulatory policy area where Georgia does somewhat poorly is occupational freedom, and the extent of licensing grew most significantly in 2011 and 2014. With healthcare professionals face generally tight scope of practice rules, though Georgia joined the Nurse Licensure Compact and gave dental hygienists some independent practice freedom in 2017, the state also maintains certificate of need laws for hospitals and moving companies. Not good. Certificate of need is a big thing. Negates a lot of freedom if you have certificate of need laws because you don't allow people to do business. You don't allow people to provide health care within the state, saying that it's okay for them to do so. But our next category, gun rights. The gun control category measures the direct cost of gun laws to gun owners and dealers. Top 5 freest states, east to west. Who do you think the freest is? Comment and let me know before we jump in. Hit that. But from east to west, we got New Hampshire, number 2, Vermont, number 5, Kansas, number 1, Arizona, number 3, Idaho, number 3. The only state in here that we haven't dove into as top 1 in a category yet is Vermont. So we're going to dive into Vermont real quick and see what makes them free, even though they're only 5th on gun rights. Vermont's economic policies are much worse than the social policies. Indeed, it is a stereotypical blue state. It is among the worst states on economic freedom, doing poorly on both fiscal and regulatory aspects, but among the best on personal freedom. Vermont is one of the highest tax states in the country. That sucks. I hate taxes. I have a moral objection to paying them. You should leave Vermont. Don't pay taxes. Vermont had a movement from about 2007 to 2011 where it was doing better on regulatory policy. However, it fell consistently after that until 2018, where it bottomed out at 45th. It is among the worst states on land use and energy freedom, and one measure of local building restrictions based on the prevalence of the term land use in appellate court decisions shows a dramatic escalation in restrictiveness since 2000. The other measure, using the WRLURI survey and imputation forward, backward, with cost of living data, shows improvement since 2005. The state has done little to restrain eminent domain for private gain. One of our toughest renewable portfolio standards in the country was enacted in 2016. Vermont ranks 5th for gun rights, but it has slid in the rankings since 5th edition of Freedom Index. It has passed a large capacity ammunition magazine ban. It has increased the minimum age to purchase a firearm and expanded background checks. Silencers, I hate that word. They should call them suppressors. Cato, you're better than this. You are smart people. Stop using dumb words. Suppressors were legalized in 2015. Vermont is one of the lowest states for alcohol freedom, with the state monopoly over wine and spirits retail and beer wholesaling. It's one of the better non-initiative states for cannabis, with decriminalization and a reasonably broad medical law. Legalization of personal possession and cultivation has only made it freer, and the legalization of commercial sales occurred after our data cutoff. Now, 5th for gun rights here, like Vermont used to be number 1 for gun rights in the country. For a long time, Vermont was the only state with constitutional carry. Vermont never passed a gun law. It was all judicial decisions that said, well, you didn't ban it, so it's not illegal. Vermont used to be a permitless, open, and concealed carry. You could only had to be 16 to buy a gun. You could carry anywhere you want. There was no restrictions, nothing. Vermont used to be the freest state in the country on guns. And while we've been seeing a trend of other states, New Hampshire, Maine, Texas, other states trying to pick up the mantle of freest gun rights in the country. Vermont's been slipping backwards. I don't think they should be fifth. They should definitely not be fifth. They've banned large capacity magazines, aka standard capacity magazines. You can't have more than like 9 rounds in a magazine on any gun in Vermont. They've expanded background checks where before there was no background check. You just went and bought a gun, went home. They've started to look into licensing. They've increased minimum ages. Legalizing suppressors isn't enough to undo the damage that they've done, in my mind, in all of a sudden going from first to anything other than first in firearms rights. Vermont has taken a huge step backwards, and it seems to be that's kind of their only saving grace. They were number 1 on firearms freedom forever, and then just recently dipped down to number 5. But next category, cannabis freedom. This category includes an index on medical marijuana policies and other policy variables. From east to west, freest states in the country for marijuana and cannabis freedom. Number 2, Maine. Number 4, Massachusetts. Number 5, Oregon. Number 1, California. Number 3, Alaska. California is the freest state on something. Let's check that out. It's no surprise that California should be one of the freest states on marijuana policy. They were among the first to legalize it. Not the first, among the first. And being a very, 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 very left-leaning state, California is all about tax and regulate and legalize. And this is unsurprising. But California is one of the least free states in the country, largely because of its long-standing poor performance on economic freedom. If you like your money, get the hell out of California. There's other states with legal pot. California is number 1 on legal pot, but they are number last on so much else. Get the hell out of California. They're one of the highest tax states in the country. Their combined state and local tax collections are almost 11% of personal income. And that's on top of your federal taxes of almost 25%. So just get the hell out. California is not for you. We don't want to talk about California. The left coast is the wrong coast. The next category, cable. This is a very under-talked about category. Telecommunication deregulation is so important to freedom, and I don't think people realize how important telecommunications deregulation is in overall freedom rankings, or it should be in overall freedom rankings. But the cable and telecom category includes telecommunications deregulation and cable franchising. Most people in this country live in a cable monopoly, where you have one provider, one service provider. You don't have an option, and that was a monopoly granted by government and hyper-regulated into government, or in some cases, it's a government-owned utility that's forcing use upon it. And how's New Hampshire on pot, Tiger? New Hampshire's not great on pot. We're getting there. We are an island of prohibition. Cannabis is legalized recreationally in Maine, Massachusetts, Vermont, and Quebec. All of our borders have legal weed over the border. New Hampshire is still an island of prohibition. We are decriminalized up to a certain amount of possession, and we do have some medical laws passed. But I do anticipate that changing. I'm working with some legislators this year, as well as a number of other people working with them. And the New Hampshire State Senate should be looking at passing a marijuana legalization bill this year. But cable deregulation got me derailed. Sidetracked there. Thanks for the question, Tigger, but now I'm sidetracked. Cable and telecom deregulation, super, super, super important. It's your access to information, your access to the internet, your access to communicating with friends, family, work. So much relies on your access to cable and telecom infrastructure in today's modern economy that people don't realize how important the deregulation of telecom services is to your overall freedom rating. There's a lot of states tied here for number 1. Sadly, New Hampshire is number 20. Okay, that's getting fixed soon. Again, that's something that's being worked on. At least New Hampshire is not 44 or 39 or awful. But number 20, tied at number 20, because from east to west, we've got Delaware, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, Florida, Louisiana, Texas, Arkansas, Missouri, Kansas, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Nevada, all tied at number 1. So New Hampshire's tied for number 20 in second place. 19 states ahead of it, all tied for number 1. We're going to take a look at a state that I don't think is going to pop up on number 1 on any category at all, ever, other than this, and that's going to be Illinois. For those of you who follow the show, for those of you who keep up with the show on the weekly podcast that we do, I did just recently do an interview with Scott Schluter of the Libertarian Party of Illinois, and he's running for governor in Illinois. And we had a great conversation about how he thinks he can help Illinois become more free. I don't think so. I'm skeptical, pessimistically optimistic on it. I hope he succeeds, but I'm not sure it can happen because Chicago is a hellhole. But Illinois is number 1 for cable and telecom deregulation freedom, and that is an incredibly important category. So let's dive into Illinois' overall ranking and see what makes Illinois Illinois. Illinois used to be a relatively decent state for economic freedom, although it almost always did much better on fiscal policy than on regulatory policy. But the state has lost some of that edge, while also, not surprisingly, losing some of its economic vitality. Its well-publicized woes with the employee retirement spending threaten to drive local taxes and debt higher. It is also one of the most cronyist states. Illinois did post one of the most dramatic improvements in personal freedom rankings we have ever seen between 2011 and 2017, but there is some sign that the fiscal situation has stabilized. Historic averages for taxes are awful. Just don't go to Illinois. Regulatory policy has been a drag on their rankings throughout the time series. After California, it is the most cronyist state in America. Cronyism bad, okay? Just forget about it. The state's minimum wage is $11 an hour, higher than it's ever been since 2000 as a percentage of the median wage. Unlike its neighbors, Illinois has no right to work. Renewable portfolio standards have been gradually tightened, raising electricity rates. In 2017, the state removed all telecom, wireline regulatory authority. That's it. It's the one thing Illinois has done right in the past decade. They deregulated telecom. Internet's available. Like internet being deregulated, telecommunications being deregulated, giving people access to information and communication is so important. And it's the only thing Illinois is doing right. The most cronyist state in the country. Their recommendations are to reform the retirement systems. Good luck. Reform civil liability system by capping punitive damages, setting the standard for punitive damages at beyond a reasonable doubt, and abolishing joint and severable liability. I'm iffy on that one. If serious about reducing smoking, preempt local flavored e-cigarette sales bans and vaping bans in bars and restaurants. CATO's losing me on these whole pass some bans. But next category is going to be incarceration. Of course, Illinois is not good on that, but left to right, east to west, top 5 freest states on incarceration standards, which include the overall freedom ranking. Oh, no. Incarceration. The incarceration and arrest category includes incarceration rates, non-drug crime arrests, and drug enforcement. This doesn't surprise me. It hurts me. New Hampshire does come in at number 9 on this, but we're going to go east to west. Maine at number 3, Vermont at number 4, Massachusetts at number 1, Rhode Island at number 2, and Hawaii at number 5. And let's give a brief check-in to Massachusetts. Massachusetts, the birthplace of liberty, the cradle of freedom, the birthplace of the American Revolution, and one of the least free states in the Union, one of the most oppressive states in the Union, leads in freedom in only one category, I believe, and that is incarceration and victimless crime prosecution. Massachusetts has long had a better economic policy regime than one would expect, given its strongly left-of-center electorate, and one of the better records on personal freedom, particularly for criminal justice. It suffers, though, from an onerous regulatory system and some relative decline on personal freedom that has harmed its overall ranking. On the fiscal policy, it's nicknamed Taxachusetts is a misnomer. I'm going to counter this. Cato's losing me. You're losing me, Cato. Did Ilya Soman write this? I swear to God. Massachusetts' overall tax burden is just slightly higher than the average, although individual income taxes are among the highest in the country. Massachusetts residents have ample choice in local government, more than 4 every 100 square miles. Blah, blah, blah. I'm hung up on this. Taxachusetts, my ass. Massachusetts is currently engaged in a lawsuit with New Hampshire because Massachusetts is trying to collect income taxes from New Hampshire residents. So don't call them not a Taxachusetts, because Massachusetts is trying to use the federal court system to say that they can levy a tax on New Hampshire. Fuck Massachusetts. But their legal weed team is one of the best in the country. They don't prosecute people for victimless crimes. They have fantastic personal freedom. They were the first in the country to legalize gay marriage and deregulate marriage. The reason Massachusetts is so high on the personal freedom scale is because a lot of those are more left-leaning libertarian policies. We rank personal freedom based on how left somebody is progressively and socially. So Massachusetts being one of the left coast states transplanted to the East Coast, that's not surprising to me. What's surprising to me is that CATO thinks they're not that bad on taxes. Screw CATO. Tigger, Hawaii is so laid back, I'm not surprised by its placement here. I lived there for 6 months. Hawaii is not a place I ever want to go back, just because of how expensive it is. Great to visit. I wouldn't want to live there. Travel freedom. This category includes seatbelt laws, helmet laws, mandatory insurance coverage, and cell phone usage laws. Let's shake this up. We're going to go west to east. Top 5 freest states for travel freedom. California, number 5. Nevada, number 4. Utah, number 1. Colorado, number 3. Vermont, number 2. I'm actually surprised New Hampshire's not up here, but New Hampshire's number 8. I'm surprised they're not in the top 5 for this one, being that New Hampshire has no mandatory insurance coverage, no requirements to have insurance whatsoever. But on the flip side, they also have the cheapest insurance in the country and the lowest uninsured driver's rate in the country and the lowest accident record rate in the country. Also, no helmets for motorcycles, but New Hampshire does have an outright ban on using handheld devices while driving. Let's check in with Utah. We haven't checked in with Utah yet. I'm actually surprised we haven't checked in with Utah. I get that Utah is an incredibly conservative cultural state with very big Mormon and religious influence on the state that keeps their personal freedom score low, but I'm surprised their economic freedom hasn't been through the roof. So let's check out their travel freedom ranking. And Utah, top 10 state on regulatory freedom, but it has slipped in absolute and relative terms on fiscal policy, sinking back to where it was in 2014 after some years of improvement in terms of absolute scores. Personal freedoms are a mixed bag, consistent with the state's religious and ideological background. Utah's overall tax burden is a bit above average. We do show a dramatic drop in the state's revenues with the onset of the Great Recession, which haven't quite been replaced. They keep calling the Great Recession, and I'm torn. I don't know if Ilya Soman and Cato folks are referencing the COVID lockdowns and the economic collapse that we've seen in the past 2 years, or the 2008 recession. But we're going to get back to that. Artemia on YouTube, it is the safety inspections and the short duration registrations. You're right. That is a big problem for New Hampshire. But so much of this, I feel like, is being addressed in this year's legislative session, and it's something I'm going to do a whole show on in a couple weeks with some state legislators to come onto my show to talk about the bills that they're supporting and purporting this year. But they're looking at getting rid of the inspection altogether in New Hampshire, and it looks like it has bipartisan support, both Republicans and Democrats supporting getting rid of vehicle inspections in New Hampshire, and that's going to be insanely massive because they're both coming at it for completely different reasons. The Republicans are saying we need to get rid of the registrations because the state has no business inspecting your vehicle and doing all that, and the Democrats are saying that we need to get rid of them because they cost too much money and they hurt poor people. And I agree with both of those reasons. So it's great. I'm looking forward to working with people to lobby on that bill. I wonder how much of the short duration vehicle registrations are due to salt corrosion every season from winter commuting. Hey, Ron, get an undercoat. Like, taking care of your vehicle is not that difficult. Ask anybody who grew up in New England. Ask anybody who's lived in New England for more than one winter. It's not that difficult to prevent the rust accumulation and the rust corrosion. When you just get your car undercoated, get your car treated, take care of your car, and these will not be a problem. All right. But Utah does well on regulatory policy, coming in 8th. It slipped a bit on personal freedom. Okay. Cato's telling me I'm wrong. On personal freedom, Utah does surprisingly well, given its reputation for paternalism. Moreover, it has been improving over the states and is creeping up toward the top half of the country. The Beehive State does well on gun rights, expected, travel freedom, actually expected, and campaign finance reform and educational liberty, but quite poorly on alcohol, blame the Mormons, gambling, blame the Mormons, tobacco, blame the Mormons. I am all for religious liberty and religious freedom, but you shouldn't let a church dictate state law. The Mormon Church should do what they want, but this is what's going to hold Utah back from ever achieving true personal freedom, is that the Mormon Church and Mormons in Utah, well, they want to live a culturally conservative lifestyle, and power and props to them. You do that, you do you. They also want to use the state to make everyone else do it. Personal freedom introduced backpack funding to free children and their caregivers to pursue their education as they see fit. School choice is important everywhere, but oh well. Utah, number 1 in travel. Miscellaneous category. I feel that this is just everything Cato couldn't wrap up in the previous categories, which were pretty expansive. We covered some pretty niche categories as far as freedom rankings, like victimless crime, health insurance, alcohol freedom, asset forfeiture, gambling freedom, instead of just like general vice freedoms, general personal freedom, and economic freedom. They went pretty in-depth on specific categories here, but miscellaneous category includes variables for regulations governing hospitals, auto insurance, and homeowners insurance. East to west, New Mexico at number 5, Wyoming at number 2, Arizona at number 1, Utah number 4, Idaho number 3. This is the first time we've seen Wyoming in the top 5, so let's take a look at Wyoming. Number 2 in the miscellaneous category. But let's take a look at their overall. As a highly resource-dependent state, Wyoming's fiscal situation can fluctuate greatly from year to year, causing some volatility in its freedom scores over time. However, its overall freedom ranking has stayed relatively stable during the past 3 years, ending up in the middle of the pack each year. The quality state is in the bottom third on fiscal policy and the bottom 10% on personal freedom, but its overall ranking is salvaged by a top 5 showing in regulatory policy. All right. Wyoming does above average on land use freedom, but hasn't reformed eminent domain law. It doesn't surprise me that Wyoming lets people use their land however they want, because Wyoming is just all land. Like, have you ever been to Wyoming? It's just land. It's like, welcome to Wyoming. You want a spot? Take one. I'm surprised homesteading is not still a thing in Wyoming. It's so wide open. It makes no surprise to me at all that they are great on land use freedom. Labor law is generally good. They have no minimum wage or right to work law, and enforcement of non-compete agreements. But employers must obtain workers' compensation coverage from a non-monopoly state fund, and an anti-discrimination law goes beyond the federal minimum. Health insurance mandates are lower than most states post-patient protection Obamacare, and the managed care model is still viable. Telecommunications deregulation bill was passed in 2014, but there is no statewide video franchising. Yeah, it's a whole lot of nothing. Nebraska, Iowa, like the whole Midwest is a whole lot of flat. Like, beautiful country to fly over and see, but they call it flyover country for a reason. Artemia, New Hampshire is one of only 15 states that have safety inspections. We have salty roads here in Connecticut too, and no safety inspections at all. I think the safety inspections are the big reason why New Hampshire is not high on the personal freedom, on the travel freedom scale, but that is something that we are addressing, and I'm looking forward to spending a lot of time working to address it. Digger, a whole lot of nothing seems pretty great for me. It'd be great for me too. I don't like having neighbors, and I would love to be in the middle of nowhere with no neighbors. But the last category here, campaign finance. Cato is a political entity, so of course they care about campaign finance, but like east to west, Top 5 freest states as far as campaign finance reform goes. New Hampshire at number 1. I was not expecting that, so we're going to come back to this. Florida at number 2. Tennessee at number 4. South Dakota at number 5. Nevada at number 3. And I think this is actually perfect. This is the last category, and finally a good time to dive into New Hampshire. I love New Hampshire. I stand for New Hampshire. You should all look into the Free State Project, fsp.org. Follow at Free State NH on Twitter, on YouTube. Check out the Free State Project NH on YouTube tonight for their podcast at 8 p.m. I'll be co-hosting. We're talking about legislative freedom and how we're going to fix a lot of these problems in the legislature this year. Don't get me wrong, I'm not condoning the state being used as an enforcement tool to coddle the lack of vehicle safety education and responsibility some people can inflict on themselves. Oh, I'm not thinking that you're endorsing it. I hate vehicle inspections. They're asinine. And there's actually a lot of research to show that vehicle safety inspection rackets, because that says their racket, their revenue generations came from the state, but the scheduling of them actually causes vehicles to be less free. People end up leaving maintenance to go as long as they can to just do it right before an inspection to make sure, rather than doing ongoing maintenance and upkeep of their car. And I'm guilty of it myself. I need new tires. I keep putting off getting new tires. I'm like, I can get another month or two out of them before I have to get an inspection. If we didn't have inspections, I probably would have got new tires 6 months ago. So I'm guilty of that myself, because the inspection system has incentivized me to let problems go as long as they can go. And that creates more hazardous road conditions. But it also makes driving less free. All right. Time to finally do our deep dive on New Hampshire. This is the analysis. New Hampshire. I don't actually care about campaign finance reform. I don't see why that's a big deal to be number 1. But we want to dig in. So, in the 5th edition of the index, Florida had overtaken New Hampshire as the freest state. This time, New Hampshire has regained the crown as the freest state in the Union. In the more distant past, New Hampshire had a huge lead over the rest of the country on fiscal policy, a lead that partly dissipated between 2000 and 2008 because of big increases in local property taxes, which were in turn driven by growth in education spending. It has rebounded quite a bit in absolute terms, but it has been eclipsed by Florida, Tennessee on the fiscal count. New Hampshire grabs the top spot overall because it does well in both economic freedom, 3rd, and personal freedom, 2nd. Something that's also true of Florida, but is not the case for Tennessee. It could be a challenge for rivals to catch New Hampshire next time because of policy changes in 2021 in a pro-freedom direction, including tax cuts, the passage of Educational Freedom Accounts program. The New Hampshire advantage could even get stronger within New England. The 3 states of northern New England pose a stark contrast in economic policies and, for the most of the late 20th and early 21st centuries, economic outcomes. New Hampshire's overall tax burden is well below the national average at 8.1%. The state government taxes less than any other state but Alaska. We show a decline in state taxes as a share of adjusted personal income from a high of 3.8% in fiscal year 2002 to 3% today. Meanwhile, local taxes have risen from 3.7% of income in fiscal year 2001 to 5.1% in fiscal year 2019, which is down from a high of 5.6% in fiscal year 2012. New Hampshire is therefore a highly fiscally decentralized state. Granted, states have quite a wide choice in local government, with 2.8 competing jurisdictions every 100 square miles. Government debt, 12.7%, consumption, 7.9%, and employment, 10.1%, are all much lower than average. And in all of these categories, we see improvement since 2010, especially on the debt side. However, cash security assets are below average and have been dropping. New Hampshire's regulatory outlook is not so sunny. However, it is still an above average state and improving relative to its past, when a decade ago it ranked in the mid-30s. Granite State's primary sin is exclusionary zoning. I hate zoning laws. Zoning laws are oppression. Zoning laws are theft. Zoning laws are a root cause of the housing shortage, a root cause of housing prices being so high, a root cause of the labor shortage because people can't get housing and there's more jobs than people in New Hampshire, and also a root cause of the homeless population because there just isn't enough housing for the people that are already here. New Hampshire is quite personally free. Incarceration rates are low, but rose significantly around 2011, only to get better again during the past few years. Drug arrest rates are also low, but moved up during the 2011-2016 before falling again. Non-drug victimless crime arrests are down substantially after being only about average for 4 years. The state enacted significant asset forfeiture and reform in 2016 and is among the top states. Tobacco freedom is below average, as taxes are fairly high and smoking bans are extensive, which is hilarious because people still drive from Massachusetts to buy their tobacco in New Hampshire because our taxes are so much lower than Massachusetts. But Cato says Massachusetts is an unfair label. The state now has limited anti-vaping law. No, they don't. It's not enforced anyways. Educational freedom is extensive in the Granite State. A liberal tax credit scholarship law was enacted in 2012 as a local option voucher in 2018, raising the state significantly above average on educational freedom, even though compulsory schooling lasts 12 years. And private schools require state approval. A 2021 expanded ESA will help the state improve its ranking in this category because New Hampshire has only charitable gambling. It scores well below the average in the gambling freedom category. Charitable gambling is weird because we also have home poker. We have legal Keno. We have the legal state lottery. We have home poker. There's a casino in Manchester down the street from my house. I don't know how to say. I'm pretty sure that casino is not charitable, but they're hiring poker dealers. If anybody needs a job and wants to deal poker as a career, there is a casino in Manchester that does table games. Its ranking should improve because of 2020 legalization of sports betting. That's right. We have legal sports betting and gambling. Cannabis freedom is above average, helped by the 2017 decrim law, dragged down by the inability to fully legalize. We're working on it. We're going to get legal cannabis this year. Alcohol freedom is about average, but the state does monopolize liquor, retail, and wine wholesale. But the effective tax rate is extremely low. Wine, but not spirits, is in grocery stores. It's one of the 2 best states in the country for gun rights. The constitutional carry bill enacted in 2017 helped here. New Hampshire has neither a seatbelt law nor a motorcycle helmet law. Policy recommendations. How does Cato think we can make New Hampshire even better? Not one usually for asking Cato's opinion on these things, but Cato's got an opinion on how we can make New Hampshire better. Fiscal policy. Local governments need to get a handle on school spending and taxes. State governments may be able to help by moving town meetings and local elections to coincide with state elections, boosting turnout and diluting the political power of insiders. That's a terrible idea. We have really high turnouts for these things. For a reason. New Hampshire is the most politically active state in the country. Every 4 years, you can't get a breakfast in Manchester without running into a presidential candidate. Like, you cannot win a state rep seat in this South without shaking the hand of every single one of your constituents. I have over 150 state reps' phone numbers. That's how representative our state house is. I know them personally, and I talk to them on a regular basis, and I'm not unique. A ton of people do that. Regulatory. Pass a right-to-work law that is consistent with free association as described in the text. We've been trying. We're working on that. Giving it another go this year. But we did give it a go last year. It didn't work out too well. Personal. Legalize more forms of private gambling that pay out at a higher ratio than the state lottery, and therefore, even for anti-gambling advocates, should be considered less exploitive. I don't give a shit about this. Gambling's fine. Gambling is what it is. There are plenty of more important ways we can improve our personal freedom here in New Hampshire. Gambling is such a small part of that. I'm advocating for more along the lines of things of removing vehicle inspections, cutting the vehicle registration fees, making these tax burdens smaller on the individuals, reducing zoning laws to increase housing opportunities and create more affordable housing in the state. Those things will be way more impactful than legalizing more private gambling on something that's not even illegal. So Cato's out their mind, but Cato gonna Cato, Ilya gonna Ilya. But New Hampshire, number 1 overall. That's the takeaway here. I missed some questions. Let's go back. Artemia, last time there was a legislation hearing in New Hampshire about vehicle safety, everyone who advocated for it were mechanics and car dealers. It's a racket. It's a funding racket. The New Hampshire Auto Dealers Association is also one of Christopher Sununu's largest campaign donors for governor. The New Hampshire Auto Dealers Association uses the inspection racket to force people into unnecessary repairs that cost them money while overlooking issues that aren't inspectable that are real safety issues. Of course, they care against it. You also want to live in a tiny house? That's your business? Absolutely. That's on the chopping block this year, too. There's a couple towns that have legalized tiny houses in New Hampshire, and there's a state bill in the legislature this year to broad scope deal with it. I don't think you want to live in a chicken coop. You want to have a chicken coop next to your tiny house for your chickens, though. Cato is very bland, but at least they got one thing right, and that's New Hampshire being number 1 overall. So... yes, Cato was saying that lockdowns are a good thing for freedom. They cannot be trusted, but they got this right. I think they got this one right. Okay, I don't know who wrote this. I don't know who was involved in the writing of these. I'm sure it was a whole bunch of people. But it's the Freedom of the 50 States 2021. Ilya Soman, I don't think wrote these. New Hampshire, absolutely number 1. If you do think Cato's bland, at 5:30 tonight, you can check it out on the Soho Forums YouTube channel. They're doing a Soho Forum between Angela McArdle of the Libertarian Party and Ilya Soman of Cato. And Ilya Soman is taking the position that mandatory vaccines are libertarian. Nonsense. I wish both major parties in New Hampshire would be more transparent about how and who they give their superdelegate positions to. The Democratic Party is actually really transparent about that. The Democratic Party has National Democratic Party rules about who is and is not a superdelegate, and that's straightforward. The Republican Party, I don't know. They change their rules every convention on how they do things. The New Hampshire Libertarian Party, though, they hold their convention in the winter. It'll be at the end of January to elect their delegates to the National Convention, and every delegate's a superdelegate. It's great. Every delegate's encouraged to vote their conscience. I hope Angela crushes him. Celedriel, I don't think it's a hope. I think it's kind of a default position to expect Angela is going to utterly crush Ilya. Angela is great at this. Angela is fascinating. She's a personal friend. She's a great friend. I was at a dinner with her Saturday night in Boston, and she was awesome. I do hope she does great in her run for chair of the Libertarian Party. She'll be a great breath of fresh air in helping the Libertarian Party become libertarian again. I know it's something we can all look forward to. The New Hampshire Libertarian Party is libertarian again. That's great news. We're actually accomplishing shit. We're getting shit done. I've got bills that I wrote that are being heard in the State House this year. State reps are coming. Digger, I don't know what the name of the channel is. Let me look it up for you. So, Soho Forum. It is the Soho Forum. And I do know that their debate tonight is at 5:30. And it's Ilya Soman of the Cato Institute versus Angela McArdle. And they're debating whether or not vaccine mandates and lockdowns are libertarian. Asinine. Mind-blowing. Blows my mind. Aaron, I don't think we should have a Vermin Supreme Freedom Scale. All he's going to care about is ponies and toothbrushing and making a mockery of the Libertarian Party. I like Vermin personally as a friend. He's a horrible representative of libertarianism in the Libertarian Party, but I do want to thank you guys for tuning in. You guys have been great. Thank you for tuning in, participating, questions, comments. We went through this whole thing. New Hampshire, freest state in the country. Even Cato agrees, and Cato doesn't know shit, but Cato agrees. New Hampshire is the freest state in the country. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button. Join the channel. Share with your friends. Tell your friends they should move to New Hampshire if they want freedom. Tell your friends they should look into the Free State Project if they want freedom. Head on over to the Free State Project YouTube. If If you guys want to check that out, Free State Project New Hampshire on YouTube. And I host every Monday night. So tonight at 8 p.m., Free State Live. And tonight we got Jeff and Melissa Cream of the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance who are coming on to help. So make sure you guys head on over, hit that reminder button so you can get a notification to tune in live at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Also, and check out our discussion with Jeff and Melissa Cream about all the bills and the state reps and the legislators who are working to fix these problems and make New Hampshire even freer moving forward. Hockey, Aaron, absolutely right. Jump on the FSP Discord. I don't have the link on me. You can get Southern Northeast to give you the link. He is great about that. And also, if you guys want to check out the weekly podcast series over on O'Donnell4Liberty.com, it's not mapped, site's still under construction, but it is what it is. Check out O'Donnell4Liberty.com. Hit subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, everywhere you are. These review and react series didn't go up, but the weekly interview series next just had a great show with Scott Schluter, who is running for governor in Illinois. And this week's podcast is with Jason Sorens, the founder of the Free State Project. We're going to talk about the academic approach to liberty and centralization and consolidation of libertarians in the freest state in the country, New Hampshire, to try and win liberty in our lifetimes. And it's going to be exciting. It's going to be fascinating. I'm looking forward to it. But that's it for today. You guys have been awesome. Tune in next time, later tonight, and be free. Thanks again for tuning in and joining us tonight. Make sure you hit that like button and leave a comment below to let us know your thoughts. If you haven't subscribed, go ahead and hit that big red subscribe button on YouTube and turn on notifications to get alerted every time we go live. If you enjoyed this content, you can join our production team on Patreon by following the link in the description. And don't forget to follow on social media and join our community Discord channel by following the links in the description as well. The best part of all of this is the community that we're building and growing. So go ahead and join us. And thanks once again to our awesome sponsors and patrons for making all of this possible. And if you can't catch the show live, you can always catch it the next day on YouTube, Odyssey, Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Breaker, and wherever else you listen to your favorite podcasts. So until next time, everybody, be free.